Loneliness. In America today, one of the greatest, widespread fears deals with a massive terrorist attack that could destroy our country. For a minute, I want you to think about the worst case scenario. What would happen if a terrorist group was able to take over our country's infrastructure and communication networks, and then bomb several of our major cities? What would be the aftermath? How would people respond? Think about what it might be like in the city of New York right before an attack. There would be thousands of people flooding the streets in all directions, hurriedly walking to and from work. Hundreds of cars would be bumper to bumper, filled with impatient people trying to get from place to place. Signs would be lit up all around, indicating that the city is alive and well. Electronic messages via billboards, cell phones, and over the radio would fill your life. Buildings surround you, full of people in almost every room who are busy at work. The smell of freshly cooked hot dogs and bratwurst mixed with brewed coffee and the smell of factories would fill your nostrils. But in a flash, this all changes. What if, somehow, you were the last person alive in the city? What would it be like? The city itself would be in dismay. The buildings, which once were symbols of posterity and strength, are now crumbled into piles. All the electronics which kept people connected are now useless and serve no purpose if they work at all. There would only be the stench of rotting flesh of those who were killed in the attack. The city, which was once full of people and anything you could imagine, is now, in effect, empty. I'm sure it would take a few days for the reality to set in, but after a while, there would be psychological effects. Think about the movie Castaway. After long periods of without interaction, you would begin to interact with anything that you could. Lamentations is a city lament that describes this kind of situation. The people of Israel were the people of God. They were unstoppable because of his hand of providence. But this all came to a shattering end as a result of their unfaithfulness to the covenant. The Babylonians came and the people were taken into exile. The city of Jerusalem was left alone, empty, desolate. The writer of Lamentation uses very different techniques to really highlight this isolation. First, he uses enjambment in chapter 1. The Hebrew word shamam appears 3 times in just 22 verses. This Hebrew word has a wide semantic range that includes to be ravaged, to be appalled, to be horrified, to be deserted, or to be desolate. This single word highlights and shows us how powerful these feelings about being alone could be. The second technique he uses is almost the opposite of enjambment. He uses a variety of different words to explain this feeling of loneliness. In verse 1, the writer uses the Hebrew word badad to describe a city. It is alone, badad, when it was once full of people, rav, yam. Then in verse 4, we find our first use of the word shamam, to be desolate. Even in chapter 2, you get the idea that God has abandoned Na'ar, even his dwelling place. The word shamam and the use of it throughout the book of Lamentations help tie the book together. It occurs 3 times in chapter 1, and once in chapters 3, 4, and 5. Twice in chapter 1 and in chapter 3, the author uses the word to describe himself or his children. This word is not just referring to Jerusalem, but the people of God as well. Then in chapter 5, shamam refers to Zion again, indicating that it is a central theme of the book because it occurs throughout the entire book. Possibly the deepest cause for lament in our world is the absence of God from our lives. We believe that God is the source of life and has saved us. Israel found that as their hope. Exile was a way of correction. Maybe we should stop and realize that when God is most absent from our lives, there is a purpose. Maybe we should learn from the Israelites, the people of God, and stop our busy lives for a moment to consider why God does not feel near. If he used exile and separation as a way of correction and warning for them, doesn't it make sense that he would use it today for us as well? How long will we hide our feelings of loneliness? Let's quit pretending that God is near when he is not. Let us lament so we can find God again.